Welcome back to our channel, your premier source for the most gripping, emotionally charged, and meticulously detailed update from the world of daytime television. Today is a day of profound tragedy and unprecedented drama as we unpack a storyline that will forever alter the landscape of our favorite families. The sun may be shining brightly over Los Angeles, but a dark, impenetrable cloud of grief and consequence has descended upon the Forrester and Spencer dynasties. Let us dive right into the heart-stopping events that are about to unfold. The simmering tension between R.J. Forrester and Will Spencer has long been a volatile powder keg waiting for a spark, but absolutely no one could have predicted the catastrophic, life-altering explosion that is about to rock Forrester Creations to its very core. For weeks, audiences have watched with bated breath as RJ's entitlement and relentless obsession with Electra Forrester drove him to increasingly dark, manipulative, and desperate extremes. Frustrated by his inability to separate Will and Electra through conventional corporate maneuvering, and enraged that his father, Ridge Forrester, outright refused to fire Will and Melissa Dillon, RJ's tactics underwent a terrifying evolution. He shifted from mere office politics to outright psychological warfare, viewing the people around him not as human beings with their own complex emotions, but as mere pawns to be sacrificed. This toxic, unchecked sense of Forrester entitlement completely blinded RJ to the devastating real-world consequences of his actions. He simply could not fathom a reality where he, the golden son of the fashion empire, would be denied what he desired. When his initial attempts to force Melissa Dillon out of the company failed, he recognized her underlying vulnerability and weaponized it. Dillon, already burdened by her own heartache and the lingering complexities of her past with Will, was terrified of losing her livelihood. RJ callously exploited this fear, cornering her in the design office and leveraging his immense power as the boss's son to coerce her into a dark alliance. He demanded that she actively participate in his malicious scheme to permanently sever the bond between Will and Electra, implicitly threatening her career if she dared to defy him. For Melissa Dillon, the pressure was an agonizing, suffocating weight that threatened to crush her spirit entirely. She found herself trapped in an impossible, soul-tearing moral dilemma, caught between the desperate need to preserve her hard-earned position at Forrester Creations and the fundamental goodness of her own heart. Despite the complicated nature of her lingering feelings for Will, she genuinely cared for him and, surprisingly, respected Electra. The thought of actively sabotaging their fragile reconciliation, of becoming the very architect of their heartbreak, just to appease RJ's bruised ego, repulsed her to her core. The internal conflict tore at her conscience, manifesting in sleepless nights, anxiety, and a pervasive sense of dread that shadowed her every step through the glamorous hallways. The breaking point finally arrives in a moment of sheer, desperate clarity. Pushed to the absolute brink by RJ's relentless demands and his suffocating, predatory presence, Dillon makes the terrifying but necessary decision to reclaim her agency. She refuses him. In a tense, emotionally charged confrontation that crackles with unspoken threats, she looks the Forrester dead in the eye and flatly rejects his toxic proposition. She declares with trembling courage that she will no longer be a pawn in his destructive, selfish game. But RJ, consumed by a blinding, irrational fury at being denied, refuses to accept her defiance. He views her refusal not as a boundary to be respected, but as an intolerable, infuriating insult to his authority and his desires. Panicked by the terrifying intensity of RJ's reaction and desperate to escape the suffocating atmosphere of his relentless coercion, Dillon flees the building. She rushes to her car, her hands trembling violently as she grips the steering wheel, her heart pounding a frantic, painful rhythm against her ribs. She just needs to get away, to put distance between herself and the toxic environment that is slowly destroying her mental health. She pulls out the Forrester Creations parking lot, her tires screeching against the pavement, seeking refuge in the winding, treacherous mountain roads that overlook the sprawling, sun-drenched expanse of Los Angeles. But her nightmare is only just beginning. RJ, completely unhinged by her rejection and driven by a dark, obsessive need to force her submission, does the unthinkable. He gets into his own high-performance vehicle and gives chase. This is no longer a corporate dispute or a petty romantic rivalry. It has violently morphed into a terrifying display of predatory aggression. The psychological pursuit has escalated into a physical, life-threatening hunt. As RJ's sleek sports car roars to life, the engine growling with menacing intent, he is no longer thinking clearly. He is consumed by the singular, blinding objective of catching her, of forcing her to pull over, of making her understand that she cannot simply walk away from a Forester without consequences. The pursuit up the treacherous mountain pass is a sequence of sheer, unadulterated terror. The winding roads, carved precariously into the steep cliff sides, are notoriously dangerous even under the best of circumstances. But in the midst of a high-speed, emotionally charged chase, they become an absolute death trap. Dylan pushes her car to its limits, her eyes wide with panic as she constantly checks her rearview mirror, only to see RJ's headlights aggressively bearing down on her. He is tailgating her with reckless abandon, his car practically kissing her bumper as he swerves aggressively, trying to intimidate her into pulling over to the narrow, perilous shoulder of the road. Inside her vehicle, Dylan's breathing becomes ragged and shallow. The claustrophobia of the high-speed chase is overwhelming, a physical weight pressing down on her chest. Every sharp turn, every steep incline, amplifies her terror. She can see the sheer drop of the cliffs to her right, a terrifying, bottomless abyss that promises certain doom. In a desperate bid to navigate a particularly sharp, notoriously deadly curve, she slams her foot down on the brake pedal. But the resistance she expects, the mechanical lifeline she desperately needs, is completely absent. The pedal sinks uselessly, horrifyingly, to the floorboard. A cold, paralyzing dread washes over her as the catastrophic reality sets in. Her brakes have completely failed. The final moments are a chaotic, terrifying blur of screeching metal, agonizing screams, and the sickening realization of impending death. With absolutely no way to slow down her momentum, Dylan's car hurtles uncontrollably toward the flimsy guardrail at the edge of the deadly curve. RJ, trailing just inches behind her in his blind rage, is suddenly forced to bear witness to the catastrophic culmination of his own reckless actions. Time seems to slow to an agonizing, surreal crawl as Dylan's vehicle violently smashes through the metal barrier, the sound of tearing steel and shattering glass echoing violently through the quiet, unforgiving mountain air. RJ slams on his own brakes, his tires smoking as his car skids to a violent, shuddering halt just feet away from the jagged, torn edge of the cliff. He throws his door open and stumbles out onto the asphalt, his breath catching painfully in his throat as he looks down into the gaping chasm. Below him, Dylan's car tumbles violently down the steep, rocky embankment, a horrific cascade of crushing metal and flying debris. It flips end over end, a terrifying display of kinetic destruction, before finally coming to a devastating, crumpled rest at the bottom of the ravine. The silence that follows the crash is absolute, heavy, and utterly suffocating. Standing at the edge of the precipice, looking down at the twisted, unrecognizable wreckage of Melissa Dillon's car, RJ Forster's entire world shatters into a million irreparable pieces. The blinding haze of his anger and entitlement instantly evaporates, replaced by a crushing, agonizing wave of horror and soul-destroying guilt. He didn't want her dead. He only wanted to control her, to force her to bend to his will. But in his relentless, selfish pursuit of his own desires, he has become the sole architect of an unspeakable tragedy. The realization hits him with the force of a physical blow, driving him to his knees. He has killed her. Her blood is permanently, undeniably on his hands. This is a pivotal, point-of-no-return moment for RJ's character. The golden boy of the Forrester dynasty, the young man who believed the world owed him everything he desired, is now fundamentally and permanently broken. The weight of his conscience threatens to crush him entirely. Every time he closes his eyes, he will see the terrified look in her eyes in the rearview mirror, hear the sickening crunch of metal, and feel the terrifying emptiness of the silence that followed. His selfish actions have not only extinguished a bright, complicated life, but have also irrevocably destroyed his own soul. He is no longer just a manipulative schemer. He is a man haunted by the agonizing specter of his own fatal recklessness. The news of Melissa Dillon's tragic, violent death sends shockwaves of unimaginable grief and horror through the entire Los Angeles campus. The Forrester and Spencer families are completely blindsided by the sheer brutality of the event. But nowhere is the impact more devastating, more explosively destructive than in the heart of Will Spencer. Will, who had already been navigating a treacherous emotional landscape, torn between his attempt to reconcile with Elektra and his lingering, undeniable feelings for Dillon, is completely obliterated by the news. The sudden, violent loss of a woman he cared for deeply plunges him into a dark, suffocating abyss of grief. When Will eventually learns the horrific truth surrounding the exact circumstances of the crash, that Dillon wasn't just involved in a tragic, random accident, but was actively fleeing for her life from a relentless, terrifying pursuit by R.J. Forrester, his grief instantly metastasizes into a blinding, uncontrollable wrath. The pieces of the puzzle violently snap together in his mind. He realizes that R.J.'s sick, twisted obsession with Elektra, his refusal to accept defeat, and his toxic need for control directly resulted in Dillon being chased off a cliff. The sheer, unadulterated selfishness of R.J.'s actions is a profound, unforgivable betrayal. The inevitable confrontation between the two cousins is a masterclass in raw, unbridled emotional devastation. Will, his eyes burning with an intensity that borders on madness, corners R.J. There is no longer any semblance of familial restraint, no lingering affection, no possibility of redemption or forgiveness. Will unleashes years of pent-up resentment, amplified 1,000-fold by the agonizing grief of Dillon's senseless death. He strips away every defense R.J. attempts to mount, laying bare the ugly, undeniable truth. R.J.'s entitlement and monstrous selfishness are the sole reasons Melissa Dillon is lying in a morgue. "You killed her." Will's voice will echo through the halls, a damning, inescapable indictment that will haunt R.J. forever. Because you couldn't handle being told no. Because you think the Forrester name gives you the right to play God with people's lives. In this shattering, explosive moment, the familial bond between the Forrester and Spencer cousins is permanently, irrevocably severed. Will looks at R.J. not as family, not even as a rival, but as a monster. The shared blood in their veins means absolutely nothing in the face of such profound, devastating cruelty. The cousin relationship is officially, entirely dead. The fallout extends far beyond just the two young men. Elektra Forrester, the unwitting object of R.J.'s fatal obsession, is left reeling in a state of profound shock and horror. The realization that R.J.'s supposed love for her drove him to such terrifying, violent extremes shatters any lingering attraction or affection she might have harbored for him. She is forced to confront the terrifying reality of the man she had been drawn to, realizing that his passion is inextricably linked to a dark, destructive possessiveness that ultimately cost an innocent woman her life. This tragedy will forever taint her view of him, cementing a barrier of fear and disgust that can never be dismantled. The structural damage to the Forrester and Spencer families is absolutely catastrophic. Ridge Forrester, who had previously defended his son and refused to fire the very people involved in this toxic triangle, will be forced to reckon with the horrifying consequences of his own blind spots. His refusal to intervene, his enabling of R.J.'s entitled behavior, indirectly pave the way for this fatal escalation. The guilt will tear at the fabric of his family, creating deep, unhealable fissures between the Forresters and the Spencers, who will undoubtedly rally behind Will in his quest for justice and vengeance against the man who caused Dylan's death. Furthermore, the legal and moral repercussions of the high-speed chase will loom exceptionally large over RJ's shattered future. This wasn't merely a tragic accident. It was the direct result of aggressive, reckless endangerment. The police investigation into the crash will inevitably uncover the tire marks, the aggressive maneuvering, and the terrifying context of the pursuit. RJ will have to face not only the agonizing tribunal of his own shattered conscience, but also the very real possibility of severe criminal charges. The Forrester name, long associated with elegance, beauty, and high fashion, will be dragged through the mud, forever stained by the blood of a young woman who simply wanted to escape. Melissa Dillon's legacy on the show will be tragically transformed from a woman caught in a messy love quadrangle into a devastating martyr, a stark, agonizing warning about the absolute dangers of unchecked entitlement and toxic obsession. Her permanent absence will leave a gaping, agonizing void in the lives of those who cared for her, particularly Will, whose journey forward will be entirely defined by his grief and his burning need for retribution. The beach house, once a symbol of refuge and complicated romance, will become a haunting monument to the beautiful life that was so violently stolen from her. In conclusion, the fatal crash on a mountain pass is a watershed, defining moment for the bold and the beautiful. It is a storyline that transcends the usual boardroom brawls and romantic entanglements, delving deep into the darkest, most terrifying corners of human nature. R.J. Forrester's relentless pursuit of control has resulted in the ultimate, irreversible tragedy, shattering a life, destroying his own soul, and permanently severing the fragile bonds of family. The echoes of screeching tires and shattering glass will haunt the canvas for years to come, a grim, devastating reminder that some actions can never be undone.